has presented today ask the court for an order on 3 specific reliefs. Firstly, that decision by NERSA taken on 12 January 2023 that Eskom is entitled to recover via an 18.65% price increase the amount of 318 billion from electricity users who are Eskom's customers in respect of 2023-24 financial year is suspended and shall not come into operation. Secondly, to insulate and protect critical infrastructure from the harsh and unpredictable effects of rolling blackouts, the Minister of Public Enterprise and Eskom shall ensure that there shall be no interruption of supply as a result of load shedding to the following institutions and or facilities: public health establishments as defined in the National Act 61 of 2003, including publicly owned hospitals, clinics and other establishments of facilities. Schools, all public schools as defined in the South African Schools Act 84 of 1996. Telecommunications, electronic communications network as defined in the Electronic Communications Act 36 of 2005, and the infrastructure necessary for such networks that are necessary for the operation of mobile phone and internet networks. Next is police stations as envisaged in the South African Police Act 68 of 1995 in respect of South African Police Service and municipal police services. Water, any entity responsible for the provision of water in terms of National Water Act 36 of 1998. Lastly, SMMEs, micro, very small and small businesses, as provided for in Schedule 1 of the National Small Enterprises Act 102 of 1996, which deal in perishable goods such as meat and milk, and which depend on electricity for storage of such goods. I will leave the rest to some of the energetic young people to finalize it.
The energetic young people on this side.
Yeah.
It's called politically is when you shift to the left, as it were. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, fellow South Africans. This particular action is vital for the sustainability of South Africa. In fact, I'm sure the General can attest to the fact that if you go to a war and you attack a country, the first area you would hit is its energy supply, so as to render the country dysfunctional. Therefore, we feel that the action that is taking place at the moment is tantamount to the sabotage of the South African economy. It's in this light that we demand that the Minister, the President, the Minister of Public Enterprises and Eskom, that within 7 days of the court order to produce a plan that does a number of things. The first is to explain the measures that it would immediately take to ensure compliance with its obligation under Section 21, subsection 5 of the Electricity Regulation Act 4 of 2006 to ensure that electricity is not reduced or terminated. Secondly, it must give us an adequate explanation of the steps it will take to ensure the maintenance plan of Eskom power stations, to ensure there's an increase in energy supply and availability ratio in such a manner that ensures that such a thing as load shedding becomes a thing of the past. It must ultimately explain national government's plan to alleviate the adverse impact of load shedding on public health, public education, and employment. Fellow South Africans, it is common cause that these rolling blackouts have plagued the nation's electricity supply that have begun since the second half of 2007 have impacted all South Africans, particularly small businesses, healthcare facilities, educational institutions, and I'm sure, as the Secretary General will affirm, has impacted on the level of people who are being employed. Therefore, if we are going to fight, we have to ensure and note the fact that this energy crisis has affected South Africa's economic growth, speculated at 1% of GDP every year, and has resulted in significant job losses, business closures, and this 18% increase will do a profound increase in inflation. So while rolling blackouts cost the economy 4 billion rands per day, and while South Africans sit in the dark and the economy is in absolute freefall, we are confident that this court action and that the judiciary will act in the best interests of the people of this country. And we will hold this government to account. In our plea, we hope to be heard on the 28th of February. And I think it's upon all South Africans to come through so that we ensure that this government is held accountable. Honorable SG, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to.
No.
Straightforward.
Questions?
Let us proceed. If there are any questions from anybody, we'll take them from there. If you can just state your name so that we know who we are talking and who you direct the question to, and then we can respond. Just keep in mind that there are multiple other stakeholders. As the papers will be served, there are various other formations that are part of this action that are going forward. But yes, sir.
My name is Dewan from the Prime newspaper. I just wanted to find out, on the back of yesterday's announcement that there will be permanent load shedding day 2 and 3 for us, in light of also local action and everything that you are trying to do. What is your assessment of what happened yesterday and the announcement that was made yesterday?
Let's take the 3 in a row so that we can keep it to the first round. Thank you, Ndata.
My name is Mmusi Maimane. I just wanted to know, do you not feel as if perhaps with some of the requests you're making in terms of Eskom essentially completely exempting the key institutions that you've identified, that their system will completely collapse? Because what we've seen already is that they've been very slow in exempting some of the institutions that have already made requests, including institutions that are under the Department of Health. So they haven't completely exempted each and every institution because they essentially say that our system simply will not survive if we exempt more than this. So do you not feel that we would be sitting at a point, if they are to exempt all of these institutions, where there's a complete blackout? Thank you.
Much trouble from the brand again. Without making it a political issue, would like to ask your comment on the President's own comment yesterday in Tuesday again in Tuesday, where he said he approached the Eskom board and they see that they don't implement the 18 points that they clarified. It's one of the things that you asked them to say. Do you believe that these folks will have an influence, and what does it say in terms of the issue of interference, which is a fear that we've always had about what goes on at Eskom? Should he have the authority to do that? Are we saying it's okay, since it speaks to what you're requesting as well?
Well, if I can chip in, I'll take the last question. It's true that the President has said what he has said in Bloemfontein. But the regulator cannot just change policy just because the president has expressed his wishes or his personal wish. But we are thankful that the president is beginning to feel the pinch. It is going to help if he tells those people in court not to oppose this demand we are putting, that the 18% by NESA must not be affected. So we're making things easy for him. So it is also going to test whether the leadership of Eskom and NESA are really, they do care about the situation. Lastly, the issue of Eskom needs to be looked at it holistically. You can't just confine your comment about what they said yesterday. If you say these areas must not be zero-rated, key institutions or areas, you want to tell me that now the people must die just because you are fearing an untested terrain of saying, you know, if you don't bring electricity to the hospitals, then it's going to affect the load shedding further. What about the areas where the VIPs are staying? Reserve Bank Governor, the President, and so on, the Cabinet. So please, that's a wrong premise.
Okay. I think just a few comments on the question asked. I think it's important to appreciate that if you are to look at the estimates of banning diesel, you're not talking less than 25 billion between 2022 and now. The cost to the economy of these rolling blackouts is not less than 1.2 trillion rands. And the rest of other issues that have been read in the statement, such as job loss bloodbath, such as workers being laid off short time, our people being plunged in serious levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities that are already worse. You would know that the country for years has been battling with the triple crisis of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. And this is a destruction of livelihoods of the people. And that's why we should not have tolerance for mediocrity. For instance, I mean, we must ask a hard question, given the plan that the president released recently. Who form part of this National Crisis Committee? Who are they? What are their engineering qualifications? Our experience of them is just academics, most of them, who have absolutely no experience of generation. And they are not focusing to what everybody should be focusing on, with due respect. They're focusing on basically privatizing the energy provision of the country. The whole energy provision of the country is being handed over to IPPs, and we are being promised that will be pulled out of this crisis through renewables, IPPs. When in fact the systems operator, just in the report, not us, Eskom systems operator, was very clear that renewable IPPs cannot solve this crisis of rolling blackouts. What we need is to focus on energy availability factor, where we must drive quality maintenance of power stations. And I think we have been harping the point that if Germany, out of the crisis with Ukraine, they didn't mince its word. It went straight and opened its power station, it opened its mines, and it extended those coal power stations, it extended their lives. Why should this government not be doing that to stop the current crisis? If, as we're sitting here, our nuclear plant in Quebec is being extended its lifespan for another 20 years, why should we not be connecting all those units that Eskom have disconnected because of some commitment to climate goals. When Germany and Europe and everybody else, we have loads and loads of our coal leaving the country to those particular countries to power their economy and to ensure that their people are not in darkness. One of the things we must reject, and reject absolutely, is this nonsense of being hypnotized, that we must accept that for 2 years we must stay in darkness. No. We want electricity tomorrow. We want these rolling blackouts to stop. If the president chose mediocrity of people to advise him, that's none of our business. We're not going to allow jobs of workers to be wiped out and our people being plunged into poverty, unemployment, which will be permanent. Because all what these rolling blackouts are going to do is to deindustrialize the country in ways that we will not be able to recover from.
I think suffice to add, your deeper challenge is this, and I want to draw parallels with Nigeria. It's an interesting economy, similar size, a little bit, a much bigger population naturally. But what happens in an energy crisis is that it begins with all of these stages. But here is the dilemma that unfolds, is that parallel industries are created because people try and mitigate against the effect of load shedding, so you start new businesses. When the day does come, when you make the assumption that now you can move away from load shedding because your energy grid is in place, you can't, because those industries now are dependent on the need for load shedding for the business to occur. Now, let me give you a real example. If you come with me to some of the municipalities in the Eastern Cape, where there's a water crisis, what invariably happens is that you have other people who start businesses that provide water, and then what happens? These are councillors who eventually provide services to citizens. Believe you me, when the municipalities now come around to fixing its own reservoirs, the reservoirs become damaged because they are a direct threat now to those businesses. So we can't sit here today and say, let's be comfortable with load shedding, because I can assure you, what becomes comfortable at stage 2 will become a basic minimum that we live with, that we will not be shocked when we're in stage 4, stage 5. It's just a way of ensuring that, like frogs in water that is potentially heating up, we become comfortable at a new temperature. That is the exercise that is going on at this point in time. The second and more issue is that I don't want to speak here in presumption. The government must come to court and explain to people why people must die in hospitals. They can't lie in court. They can't invent stories about sabotage or create an environment upon which we are unclear.
Or the coal is wet.
Or the coal is wet, so when it rains we all feel load shedding, when it's hot there's load shedding. We need transparency up front, and we need accountability. In which universe can any particular government cost an economy to the extent that it is, and nobody, not a single person, is held accountable? This is not a natural disaster. It's a human disaster. And if that is so, who are the humans responsible for it? So I do believe that that's going to be crucial. And when we engage the new board, Eskom are one of the respondents that have been listed. They need to come and make their case. They need to make their case before the people of this country. What is you will see in the papers is that we are also demanding Parliament, because Parliament must be able to demonstrate its acts of accountability over the executive since 2007, so that we know quite clearly that we can't be living in a chronic environment without a sense of accountability. I think as we table plans, we'll certainly make a submission as to perhaps what is the pathway to ensuring that we end load shedding. But we can't be comfortable with the level of mediocrity that this government is producing, and what seems to me an insulting excuse by this government as to why we should have load shedding, keeping in mind that for some citizens, load shedding is only but one component. Load reduction is a permanent feature of their lives. Let's take another round if there's any, and then we can wrap it at this point.
You look happy.
Cover everything.
I've got one more question. You headed to the court.
Well, a very good afternoon to you. You're now watching SA Today with me, Unati Bajasha. Well, not looking good for Eskom. Certainly, of course, many challenges they are facing, including from this particular group. Of course, you've been watching BOSA leader Mmusi Maimane, UDM leader Bantu, Holomisa and Numsa Secretary General Irvin currently briefing the media and unpacking just some of the legal papers against the power utility Eskom and the Minister of Public Enterprises to be served in the North Gauteng High Court. Of course, they are now saying that they will be taking this matter to the North Gauteng High Court. Last week, their joint legal teams, as you will recall, issued a letter with a deadline of the 20th of January to the power utility, but that deadline was not kept.